Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bug Scope, and very excited to have you come on in today. Hello, replay viewers. Hello, everyone who's here with us live today. This is your host, Isa Betancourt, and I'm very excited to welcome a guest today. And I'll bring him on right now. Welcome, Miles, to the broadcast. So, Miles is a parasitoid wasp researcher who's working over at the Smithsonian or the National Museum over in Washington, D.C. And I'm really thrilled to have him on today. I've known Miles since 2014. Woo! So 7 years. Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. Okay. I was like, why are you so quiet? So, hi, Miles. Welcome to the
Yay.
broadcast.
Great.
So great to have you here. You completed your PhD about a year ago at the University of Florida after moving from the University of Manitoba, right? With your lab.
University of Florida was my first postdoc.
A postdoc. Oh, my bad. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Like I was at University of Central Florida, hence the confusion, right? No worries.
All right. Excellent. Yeah. So great to have you here today, and super cool that you're broadcasting from the collection as well. Welcome everybody who's coming into the chat here today. David, hello. Pablo, hi. Tyler, hey. Dundam, hello. Asking the questions right off the bat. And David as well, saying, how do you know Miles, Isa? Did I say exactly how, or just that we met in 2014?
Yeah, I don't think you said exactly, so go for it if you want.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we met at the Bugshot event, which is an insect photography event that's run by John Abbott and Alex Wild, and then they have a rotating cast of other instructors like Thomas Shahan and also Peter Nisrecki. And so we both met in Georgia. Actually, I'm broadcasting from Georgia today too, so that's a coincidence. Atlanta, Georgia, visiting family here. And so, yeah, we both went to work on our insect photography, and yeah, have seen each other at insect conferences and on the internet, interwebs, here and then ever since.
Yeah. And I joined you in one of the live for, was it Denver, when we ate a bunch of bugs?
Oh, that's right. At the Entomology Society of America conference in Denver, we also went to this entomophagy bug eating event, which was pretty cool, where there was a bug chef who cooked up scorpions, and what else was there? Probably crickets. That's a classic.
Yeah, and some kind of like mealworms or other like larvae or something. It was all very tasty.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So I think asking what drove you into catching parasitoids, and also like generally what are parasitoid wasps? Enlighten us. Yeah.
Sure. Maybe if you have the slides, if you could pull up the first one.
Okay. Oops. We lost Miles. So hopefully he will be back with us in a moment. We were having some technical difficulties with getting him on. We think it had to do with the firewall of the Smithsonian Institution. So, but here's some wonderful photography. I'm guessing Miles took these.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Did you take all of these images?
Yes, I did.
Wow, awesome.
Buckshot, right? Like using the white box to make really pretty like white backgrounds.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so like I just wanted to share, like this is how I known Issa through like our love for macro photography, but also like here are just examples of the order Hymenoptera, right? So this includes, like sawflies, ants, bees, and wasps, right? And the group that I tend to work on, the parasitoids, is actually the majority of the order Hymenoptera. So I know people are familiar with ants and bees, of course, and probably yellow jackets and things like that. But the majority are actually really tiny little wasps. So Isa, can you go to the next slide
Yeah.
or image?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so here is probably most people are familiar with it. They've seen like caterpillars, probably um, like covered in these little eggs, like tomato hornworms or something, right? So all these little cocoons on their body, right, on this caterpillar are actually little wasps, right? So this is just a really common group of parasitic wasps that lay their eggs inside the caterpillar, and then they will chew their way out and then form these little cocoons. They spin their silk on top of the caterpillar. The caterpillar will eventually die, and then these little wasps will fly off and start the cycle all over again. So this is just a common example of parasitic wasps. Right, so and the reason sometimes we call them parasitoids, and you can think of that as an in between a predator and a parasite, right? So if you think of a true parasite, something like a tapeworm or right, like or some sort of ectoparasite that feeds on you, they don't want the host to die, right? Because if the host dies, they gotta go find a new host. Whereas a true predator, you think of something like a lion or wolf, they hunt and then they kill um, their prey, right? And then they have to do this multiple times throughout their life to sustain themselves. Parasitoid is somewhere in between these two. So somewhere, it's similar to parasites because they will find a host, and often only just one host, right? But then they're similar to the predators because they kill their prey. So, but what's neat about parasitoids is that they often only need one host, right? So they can basically their entire larval stage as they're growing up, their nutrition comes from just this one caterpillar here. So, yeah.
Cool. Fun fact for Bugscope history: a year or so ago, we I live streamed 3 hours of little parasitoid wasps making their cocoons on top of the back of the saddleback caterpillar. Yeah,
Nice.
good times.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right,
This
slide 3, you said? Oh, sorry.
sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. This might be at least it's a little harder for me to see. I don't know about. I guess depends on your viewing screen, but this is like a family tree of Hymenoptera, right? And um, I guess this is going to be a little interesting. So everything in the middle is sort of what I work on, like the group that's parasitic wasps, right? So Hymenoptera started from feeding on wood or like plant feeding, right? So these are the sawflies. They're considered some of the like the most ancient lineages of Hymenoptera, and then from this they switched hosts to feeding on other insects. And this is when parasitism evolved. Right? And from there, they have like radiated, and there's so many species because there's just so many insects out there for them to attack. And basically, you can find any kind of insect or even spiders, and in some cases even nematodes, and there are some parasitoid wasps attacking them. And from this lifestyle, that's where ants and bees come from. So they basically switched from feeding on other insects, in terms of bees, they switch back to being vegetarians again. So it's really interesting. in Hymenoptera that the predominant lifestyle is feeding on other insects.
Wow, that
So
is really
yeah,
interesting.
I
Cool.
find this like really fascinating in the diversity. If you could go to the next slide. Um,
Sure. We do have a couple of questions coming in, but it
oh,
sounds
okay.
like maybe they'll be answered by your next slides. I'm not sure, but I can you can let us know. So JJ Walsh is asking, are these wasps good or bad for biodiversity and ecological balance?
Hmm.
And are these found all over the world?
Yes, they're found all over the world. Well, except for maybe Antarctica. Um, and in terms of good or bad, that's a really good question because I guess that depends on you're viewing this from like a human perspective or you're viewing it from a biodiversity perspective, right? So
Oh,
they are regulators of insects, right? Because they feed on other things. They're not inherently good or bad. They're just predators, right? It's like saying whether a wolf or a lion is good or bad because they're killing like gazelles and other things, right? But it could be detrimental or beneficial to us depending on what they're eating, right? So if they're agriculture pests, right, or forestry pests, that's like killing our forests, killing our crops. We often use these parasitic wasps as biocontrol, right? So rather than spraying chemicals, we use them, release them into the field. They do their thing, and then they kill their caterpillars or whatever is feeding on it. Then I guess from our perspective, that's considered good. But if there's something beneficial insect like maybe ladybugs that's already feeding on aphids, and then you have these wasps that kill the ladybugs, then it's considered bad from our perspective, right? So it really depends on how you view it. I think they're phenomenal, and for the most part, it seems that the good outweighs the bad in like what we use them for.
oh, okay. So I brought up the next slide. My connection's a little bit glitchy, Miles, so I might miss something that you say here and there because of that. Um,
Yeah, no worries. We'll
so
we'll make it
apologies
work
in
somehow.
advance.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So
And
this
David
can.
Howden saying it seems okay. The connection seems okay except for when you started the presentation. So I think it's not as bad as it seems on everybody else's end, thank goodness. But just
Okay.
heads up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So I wanted to show this wasp because it's a rare one. This is like one of the first considered the ancestors of all the parasitic wasps. That's like still living today. So it's a living fossil kind of. Um, so the sisters of this species, these are all russet wasps. So, like everything else they're closely related to, are feeding on wood, right? So they lay their eggs inside wood and then they feed on it. Except for this one, is actually a parasitoid, right, or a parasitic wasp that feeds on other insects. So, we think that this thing has switched from feeding on plant material to other insects since they're already burrowed in the wood. It's like, oh, this is a nice nutritional um, thing that I can eat, and this is how they switched from plant feeding to insect feedings, and they're actually not that common anymore. So I just happened to find this one. Actually, one of my undergrads working in the lab, he was just outside eating lunch and he saw this thing. He was like, I've never seen this before. He collected it. He's like, do you know what this is? And I just like was super excited because it's really uncommon, especially to see one alive. So I was able to photograph it. Yeah. I think Isa might be disconnected a little bit too. Are you back, Isa?
I think so.
Okay.
I hope
Yeah,
so. Next slide.
sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Always exciting when you find an insect that um, you're hoping to find or encounter. Right. So before. Oh, I think I. Here we go.
I'm now seeing both. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so and here are just some of the diversity of the parasitic wasps, some of the prettier ones I've taken. And actually, the bottom right one was at the second bugshot I attended. I don't know if you were at that
Oh,
one, Isa. I
nice.
don't think so. That was in Austin?
I was not.
Okay,
No, I only went to the one where I met you.
gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see
Also,
a lot.
quick
Yeah,
question, Miles. Is there any chance we might be able to get you a little lower in the frame so that the name banner doesn't go across your face?
sorry, say that again. The camera gets a little, like, up here.
Oh, I was wondering if you could, yeah, if you could frame it so that your head is not at the very top of the screen. That's all.
Uh,
So we
okay,
can, so the banner at the top, there's a banner that goes across that has your name, and that will go across your face if your face is at the very top of the screen. If that makes sense.
okay. So I'll just
Okay,
try to
cool.
sit back like this, so maybe that'll help.
Okay, that works too. Cool. All right,
Um,
thanks.
yeah. So so here are just some of the wasps that I've taken pictures of, and you noticed a lot of them have this long tail like thing, and that's the egg laying tube, and that's how they are able to find hosts that's like hidden away either in the wood or some other material, and they're able to drill their way inside and lay their eggs, and this is called an ovipositor, right? So only the females have this, and this is actually what like some of the modify to become stingers, right? So a group of these wasps have developed stingers, and they're called the stinging wasps, and this is modified from this egg laying tube. Once they become stingers, they cannot lay eggs anymore, so they have to lay their eggs from like a hole underneath the ovipositor or underneath the stinger. So that's why most of these wasps cannot sting you at all. Well, some of them are like the ovipositor. If they're really like hard, they can jab you, and it will go through the skin, but there's no venom or anything that like it's sort of like a bee sting or a wasp sting. So they're pretty safe to handle as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's a really good topic to bring up too because the ovipositors look so long and slender, like they could potentially hurt you, but really that's not why they're so long. It's to reach hard to reach places.
Yeah. And a lot of them have really narrow waists, right? So that's also a modification that makes them more flexible. Um,
Mm.
I don't have that picture, but Alex Wild has this really good one of one aphid parasitoid that like bends its abdomen all the way back just to oviposit like inside from underneath an aphid. So you really need to be flexible to in order to do
Wow.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Next slide.
sure. Or we could take some questions. Whatever. Can you see me? My
Okay.
it looks like my camera's
I was
off.
yeah, I was about to say that your camera did go black. Did it?
Yeah.
Is it flipped? Maybe. Or maybe it
Okay.
was flipped.
No,
Now
now
we
it's
can see you. Okay, I'll bring us back on screen too. Cool.
yeah. I
Yes, if
just have
anyone
a
has
few
questions so
slides
far.
made. So, but yeah, feel free to just ask questions. Just
Hmm. There was that question earlier on from Twitch, which is what drove you into catching parasitoids and why?
yeah. So I always like insects, but I really think parasitoids are cool because they feed on other insects. They often have really interesting life histories, right? Like how they find the host. So and this is, of course, not restricted to wasps. There are other parasitic insects. There's a lot of parasitic flies, also like some beetles, moths, and stuff. But the majority are in the flies and the wasps. So I actually wanted to study flies to begin with because the person that taught me as an undergrad was a fly person. I just thought flies was the coolest thing. But for one reason or another, like that didn't quite work out, and I started my career like working with a professor that worked on little wasps, and that's how where it began. The more I looked into them, they're really pretty, right? Once you're able to see them and you realize how pretty they are. But like often they're overlooked. So that's how I got started. I guess I've been jumping around within Hymenoptera. I worked on a little bit with ants at University of Florida because my advisor was an ant person. But now I'm back in the wasp world, as you can see behind me, all the pictures of wasps.
I'll make your screen bigger so we can all appreciate the wasp photos in the background too. There they are. Yep, pictures of specimens, and is that a face on the one side?
Yeah,
Nice.
so I don't know if you can see this one here. This is
Yeah.
it's only like 0.1 millimeter. This is the scale bar. So
Oops.
this whole thing is probably just 1 millimeter in length.
Hmm.
But they're super cute.
Oh, that's the whole body of a wasp. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, all curled up. Very
yeah.
cute.
And I think,
So cool.
like people have rated as like this might be one of the cutest wasps ever. Right? Like you
Yeah,
see them, they're pretty adorable.
yeah, totally. Um, and what's it called? Also, the thing you said about them being overlooked um, makes me think about a time when I was in the car with my mom. We were carpooling into the city, and she was like, "Oh, like Issa, there's a little fly on the dash," and I was like, "No, mom, that's not a fly. It's a parasitic wasp." And she was like, "What? Like whatever." And but it was like one of those moments where it's like, yeah, most people when they see them fly by, since many of them are so small, think, oh, it's a fly. But if you take a closer look, many of those small little insects that are flying by might actually be some of these wasps or parasitoids that we're talking about today.
Yeah, a lot of people think they're either flies or ants, right? It's just like I
Oh
guess
yeah,
depends on the color, and of course, ants are really, if you think about it, ants are just for the most part wingless wasps, right? But some of them do have wings that they rip off later after mating. But yeah, so
right.
yeah, it's funny that you
Yeah.
mentioned that. Is like last summer I was in Toronto and then I was walking with my mom, like trying to be safe COVID. So we are just taking some strolls around the neighborhood, and one of these wasps landed on my hand, and it was a really pretty one. So I went to show my mom right while it was still on my hand, and she just instinctively just swatted it, thinking it was a mosquito.
Oh no.
I was like, "What are
Oh.
you doing?" Yeah, yeah. So that's
Oh.
my mom.
R.I.P.
She's entomophobic. She's getting better because this is my career now. She tries to be supportive, but it's still pretty hard for her to, you know, when I bring
Yeah.
bugs back in the homes.
How did her uh, phobia for insects or fear of insects not rub onto you?
That's a good question. I think it's because my grandmother really loved insects. I don't know how it skipped a generation, but she used to take
Okay.
me, like, I grew up in China and, like, we used to go out hunting, right? Like, in Beijing, there's not even a lot of nature, but you were able to find insects if you're really looking. So, like, she used to take me to go collecting with a net that my grandpa made me, and we would just go out sweeping for dragonflies, cicadas, whatever. And I think that really started me off at an early career. At a young age, they were just like, I love insects, and even though my mom's not a big fan of like anything like spiders or any of these things, so like she knows I like insects, so she'll buy me a little book, and it's just like encyclopedia of animals, right? And it's like written for kids in Chinese. I still have it. It's all like really worn out, but like I just absorbed all of that as a child, so I think it all started from
Oh,
there. So even though she's not a fan of it herself, she was at least supportive about it.
that's good. Yeah, that's so important. And yeah. Now we continue to the next slide.
Sure.
Okay. So slide number 6 is where we are at.
Yeah. So here are just some of my favorite parasitic wasps. So these are called eucarydids. So like they don't really even have common names, um, but they're found in most parts of the U.S., parts of Canada, and probably like in more abundant in tropical areas. There's a lot in South America. So most of them attack ants, and you see that they have all these crazy modifications on their body, and it's thought that a lot of this is to like either prevent or like ants can carry them like more easily if they hold on to one of these like handlebars almost that they have,
Mm.
and they're just one of my absolute favorites because they just look so like out of this world, right? Like one of my favorite memes is like it's just like go home evolution, you're drunk, and it's one of these eucarydiid wasps.
That's right. A little shout out to Miles's entomology memes page. If you guys want some entomology fun and play. Um, David Haddon says they almost look beetle-like.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's just to somehow protect them, like being like growing up in like ant nests and stuff, right? So you don't want the wings to be damaged. So maybe they have a lot of these, but really we don't know too much about this. The world expert of this group is John Harity at UC Davis, and I remember like we were in Peru for one of the meetings, of just watching him collect these things and just like digging through ant nests and finding these like little pupa and these beautiful, really bizarre looking little wasps amongst all the ants. Really cool.
Wow. Yeah, they're really cool looking. They kind of remind me too of those ant mimicking hemipterans. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. Although
There's also like the
different because
membracids, right? The little tree hoppers often have all these
other
like
tree
crazy
hoppers.
ornamentations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Al-
it's kind of like that.
Although those ones don't go into ant nests,
No, no.
but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Hello over in Germany, says Mark Hoffman says greetings from Germany. So greetings. We have a couple questions. Do you want
Sure.
to do another slide or do the questions now,
Let's
Miles?
do the questions.
Okay. Blinky Bill says, saw a hawk wasp dragging a huge huntsman. Haven't been outside since. Is that in the same category?
Yeah, so those big like spider wasps and other things are technically stinging wasps. And this is where like the definition of parasitoid and like predator blurs a little bit because those wasps tend to collect multiple spiders or whatever they feed on, and they bury it into the nest. They'll lay an egg on it. Those their prey is paralyzed, but they eat multiple hosts. So like often we don't consider them as true parasitoids, but more like a predator that just like stash your meat away. But yeah, like they're all related. So as far as I'm concerned, they really are just like more specialized parasitoids. But yeah, like I think they're spectacular. I would love to see the tarantula hawks in like the west, like in the desert of continental U.S. I have not made my way out there yet. So in the East Coast, we just have much smaller little spider wasps.
Mhm.
Yeah, they could be a little scary, and apparently they have a painful sting. But they're like a lot of those ones they're more concerned about using their own venoms to hunt their prey, right? So they use their venoms to actually subdue their prey, so like paralyze them. So why would they waste their venom on you unless they absolutely have to, right? So I know there's videos on YouTube about people getting stung by what is his name, coyote something.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, Coyote
yeah,
Peterson or someone.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, where like they put the wasp on you and forces them to sting. Of course, they will hurt a lot, but given a choice, I'm sure most of these wasps will rather do their own thing rather than sting humans. So don't be terrified. As long as you're not like messing with them, they probably won't sting you.
yeah. They want nothing to do with you if you leave them alone. In that case. Uh, Thank you, Miles. So David Howden says some of them are so specific in their hosts. Do we know how they find them?
Yeah. So this is like like a lot of people are trying to do research on like this called host specificity, right? So because there are some wasps that are more general, they will attack a variety of hosts, and then others seems to only attack like one or two things that is very specific, and a lot of it has to do with chemicals. And like you see that most of these wasps have really cool little antennae that if you see them live, they'll just keep using it to tap around. And we think that's often to do with like chemical signaling. So they find their host chemicals, or if they're feeding on plants, the plants will actually release these volatile compounds, these chemicals that basically attract parasitoids as sort of a like as a like I'm being attacked, come and feed on these things. So and that seems to be how they're honing in on these whatever their prey is. They'll find, like the host plant that they like to feed on, right? So whatever tree out there it is, and then they will start searching. But and people have done some sort of like experiments where they give called a Y olfactometer. So it's basically a Y-shaped tube. You put the wasp in here, and then you put two things at the end. Like sometimes it's just like the whatever tree of volatile chemicals, and the other side do not have it. They tend to go to the side with the volatile compounds. So it's definitely something that like it attracts them, and then they will start doing a more thorough search. But as to like how they exactly find, like like you can find a tree, but it's a big plant. Where do you search from there? That I don't think we know too much about. But of course, I am not a chemical ecologist, so there might be more advances in this field I'm not aware of.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's so complex, and what a world to discover and explore. Mark is saying, and David's sending me appreciate a word. So thank you for that answer. Mark Hoffman is asking, is there any group of invertebrates that you know of that has a surprisingly low number of parasitoid wasps? And why do you think that is?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. I think a lot of the well, like the aquatic insects, or the ones that tend to be have like most of their forms in aquatics lives, like ephemeroptera, like mayflies, stoneflies, those type of things. They don't have nearly as many parasitoids, if any, like that I can think of off the top of my head. And the majority of the parasitoid wasps seems to be attacking on land. There are a few exceptions that they will go underwater to attack these aquatic moths or caddisflies, but they're still relatively rare. So a lot of these aquatic habitats are just not being um, explored by parasitic wasps. I mean, for obvious reasons, going underwater is a bit of a challenge, but I don't actually know why it's like. Obviously, like I said, there are some exceptions, but they're not nearly as um, dominant as on terrestrial environments. Basically, on land, if you have an insect, there's probably something feeding on either a wasp or a fly.
Cool. My connection dropped during your answer, unfortunately. I'm
Oh,
wondering, um, I wonder if it has to do with the VPN that I'm connected to. And I'm wondering if I'm wondering if I quit out of the VPN, it, if I can do that without the whole broadcast
I think it
going.
should,
But
it
if
will
my connection,
disconnect you generally for a little bit, right? Like when you do that.
yeah, but I'm already getting disconnected, so I'm guessing
Oh,
it will be okay. Right?
all right,
That's what I'm
it's
thinking.
worth a try.
All right, I'm gonna try it. So, um, I'll bring up the next slide for before I try it. Um,
Okay,
and then, ooh, galls. Are these galls? I think. Okay, and now I'm gonna quit the VPN.
okay, all right. Wait, is everything still going? I guess so. Okay, so these are galls. So this is what I'm really interested in. I spent a lot of my time studying them, and these are some of just the galls that I've collected. Most of it from Florida, where I lived. Actually, I collected most of these at Archbold Biological Station right before the pandemic hit. So I was starting my social distancing a month earlier because I was doing field work. So these galls are made by specialized insects called gall wasps, and they're another one of these reversal. So their ancestors are parasitic wasps, but then they switched to become plant feeding, and they're specialized plant feeders that make these basically plant tumors that their larva lives inside and feed on the tissues. And you see that there's like all sorts of a variety of them out there, and it's because they're actually a lot of these are just results of evolution. They're evolved all these spines, hairs, resin, stickiness, right? So all of this is to prevent being attacked. Can you go to the next slide, Isa, if you're back?
Yep.
Cool.
And also, it totally worked. My connection is so much better.
Nice.
Thank goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like a typical gall wasp community, right? Like I said, because like they make this perfect little house that they live in, like a gingerbread house that they feed on, right? Of course, other insects want in on this, right? So you have like a host plant here. So this is a rose gall wasp. They're make a gall on the rose. You have these other gall wasps that cannot make galls themselves anymore, so they'll make little galls inside the gall that's made by the original gall wasp, and these are called inquilines. So there you can think of them as sort of like cheaters. They're just like, right, like less resource here. I'll just overposit inside a gall that's already made, and then you have all
Wow.
these other things feeding on either the inducers or the inquilines. So you have the parasitoids, and then you have parasitoids of these parasitoids. These are called hyperparasitoids. You see that it gets really complicated, and you have basically a food web building just from this a single gall system. I know in this picture I've shown everything with this nice little neat arrow showing you what everything is feeding on, but realistically for us probably a lot of these arrows are more like question marks, but we don't actually know how they interact with each other, at least not well. So and there's a lot of diversity here. So Isa, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah. Kind of the idea of Russian dolls has come up in previous broadcasts of
Yeah, that's a
an
great
insect
idea.
and an insect and an insect, or
Yeah.
a plant, I guess, in this case too. So, all right, slide 9.
Yeah, and this is just one of these examples. So I helped describe this wasp called the Crypt-keeper wasp a few years ago with some of my colleagues at Rice University. Um, so this is a tiny little wasp. You see that's a scale bar on the bottom. It's like less than 2 millimeters in length,
Wow.
but it has a really cool biology, and it's actually like it's been published in like National Geographic and like a few other magazines covered it because it just has such a bizarre biology. So if you go to the next slide,
Yeah.
you'll see
Well,
the life
I want
cycle.
one- I want one more moment to ooh and all over it, because it is gorgeous, and the image that you guys took also is amazing, and um, like thank goodness for the scale bar too, because otherwise I think it's a lot bigger, especially because of the image quality. Because as you get smaller and smaller, like it's I don't know, amazing to have this crispness, and it's gorgeous wasp you got there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it really helps showcase how pretty they are, right? Once you actually can see them. Otherwise, it's just a tiny little bluish green speck that, or like piece of
Yeah,
dust. Yeah.
yeah, it totally unlocks access to that world.
Yeah, so here's a diagram one of my colleagues has drawn up. So on top, you see what's in orange is a gall wasp, right? So like this is a normal life cycle on top. So they will lay an egg, it will make a gall, they will feed in there, and then they will emerge at the end of it, and that's the end. But if one of these crypt-keeper wasps comes and attacks them, so that's the thing shown in green, and and this like changes the behavior of the original gall inducer. So instead of leaving from the galls, they will chew a little hole open on top of the gall, but then they will die right there. And once they die, they actually plug their head at this hole. So like this hole is not big enough for the head to emerge. So they chew a smaller hole and then they die in there with their head blocking it. And the parasitoid wasp actually feeds from inside this skull, and then from inside the gall and through the body of this dead wasp, and they leave through the head of this the dead host. So it's really cool. So like the bottom figure shows, right, like one of these galls, you have these little holes and all these dead wasps inside with their head plugged in. And the reason for this, at least what we think, is that because the parasitic wasps don't have strong mandibles, they cannot chew their way out of these galls themselves. So they basically somehow manipulate their host into doing the hard work for them. So they chew a little bit open, and then they will leave through the gall. And we're still not really sure how they actually do this. We don't know how they manipulate this host. And this could just be one of many parasitic wasps that we have that's feeding on these gall systems.
Wow, that's really cool. Um, we have a question here above, and also thank you for the Buy Me a Coffee award, Herbert, and thanks JJ Walsh for becoming an active sponsor of the Bug Scope. Also, for anybody who's here live, thanks for joining us. And uh, all of the awards that are given, I split with the guest on the broadcast, so you can go buy yourself a coffee or an ice cream or something. And thanks for joining us today. So thank you guys. So David has a question saying, now that makes me think, gall wasps cause the plants to produce extra tissue to feed on. Do any parasitic wasps cause similar tumors in their hosts?
Not so much tumors that I'm aware of, but of course, like we don't. There's a lot we don't know about, like the biology, physiology of these things, right? So it's very much possible. Some of the ichneumonids and braconids, they have these virus that they've incorporated into their own genome. They use that virus to suppress immune system of their host, which is really cool. And it's in ichneumonids and braconids, which are sisters, and the virus is also divided with them. So this seems to be like ancient co-speciation between the virus and the wasp. And it's really cool that they are able to suppress their immune system, right? Because they're feeding inside their host. Otherwise, in a normal, healthy, right, just like our blood, we have these immune responses that can, like, wrap things around and then like get rid of any invaders. But using these things or virus-like particles, they're capable of suppressing their host immune system so that they can survive inside the body of their host.
Yeah, that's incredible. Uh, which also makes me think, do you happen to know about the fossil record of galls and gall wasps? Like,
Um,
how long have, like, do you know what the oldest recorded
Oh, the oldest, I don't remember. So we
or
have,
around?
I really don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Um, yeah, so like I know we have some like some records from. Were you there for one of the presentations? I feel like ECN has given those presentations, right? Like one of the tar
Oh,
pits. I don't remember the name of that one.
oh, yeah. Um,
It's okay.
yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, yeah. I mean, when we talk about these really wild relationships with different organisms, it just makes me, I just go back to like, wow, these things have been around for millions of years, and all the generations that it took to get to this spot, and it's just a great reminder of how much like richness and like really wild, crazy stories and interactions there are in our world that we know, and then
Yeah.
all those ones that we don't know yet too, which are is exciting to think about as well, which you're discovering and chipping away at bit by bit,
Yes.
Miles. Super cool.
Yeah, and we have new ways of looking at fossils now, right? Like we have all this micro CT technology, and some of my colleagues have been using it on galls, where you're doing a micro CT scan essentially to see what's inside, so you can see the interactions without having to cut open the galls.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Without disrupting it,
yeah,
like you're a spy camera going in
yes,
to see what the
exactly.
deal is.
Very expensive spy camera.
Yeah,
So
cool.
I actually have some of these galls from the museum collection here. You see the really
Oh,
big ones.
Let's make it bigger.
So these are found in California. That's why they're called like Corcus californicus. Corcus is the genus for oak, so oak in California. Not the most um, inventive of names, but yeah. So like they can get really big, and the wasps
Wow.
are not huge, right? The wasps are still like about like that big, and there's multiple of them tend to live in here, and then so you can imagine the amount of insects that can attack these things, right? So of course the wasps don't like the parasitic wasps don't attack when it's fully grown like this because they cannot get the ovipositors in there. So they attack
Mm-hmm.
when the galls are still young, very small on the leaf tissues, and then as the gall grows, more and more parasitic wasps comes in, and the ones that come later will have longer ovipositors, right? So that's
Oh,
what one of the
wow.
pictures I've shown you, like the top left, the blue one. That's one of the last ones that attack these, and they have the longest ovipositors.
Is it
So
this picture with the red
yeah,
eyes?
the one on the top left is a torimus. So a lot of
Wow,
them are associated with gulls. You can see that the proportion of their ovipositor to their bodies is just quite amazing.
it is. Yeah. What a world.
Yeah,
All right, slide 11.
sure. Yeah, and this is just to show like the diversity of these gull parasitoids that I work on. Well, parasitoids and associates. Sometimes we have these things like ants also live in these gulls. We're not really sure what their roles are in here. So some of them tend seems to be just living inside the gulls, like old gulls. Some of them are actually tending the gulls because some of these gulls secrete nectar. But you have all these parasitic wasps, and many of them are undescribed or like not known to are like either not known to science or we're not sure exactly how they're different from each other. So that's what my job is, try to figure this out right now. But you can see there's a tremendous amount of diversity, and all of this is just from a single gull, and we have like 1,500 species of gall wasps worldwide that we know of. So you can imagine this number goes up a lot worldwide.
Wow, totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Lots of colors and wing venation patterns and
Hmm.
all sorts of things there. Did you
Yeah, you can.
photograph these?
No, a lot of those were photographed by my colleagues while we were preparing the papers. So, like,
Okay.
I'm in the process of doing more of like high quality like specimen images that's for publication. But that one is great for just showing like diversity. I think.
Totally. Cool. Thank you for all of these slides. Yeah, so welcome everyone to the broadcast. If you have questions for Miles, put them in the chat. Now's your time to ask whatever you might otherwise have been afraid to ask about parasitoid wasps. So, um, yeah, yeah, very cool. So, what are you looking for? What are you looking forward to this upcoming year with your work?
Yeah. So I've been trying to wrap up this like a few projects that we started like before the pandemic. Of course, it makes things a little harder right now to access the museum because we like there's limited numbers of people that can be here. So I try to be productive when I'm actually in the museum. But we're
Mm-hmm.
doing a big phylogeny, right? Like a big family tree for the Euritomids, which are what I've been focusing on this particular family. We're using this new genomic technique called ultra conserved elements, so we can capture like thousands of genes across these wasp genomes and build this family tree because there's no family trees really been built for this group. So this will be one of the first large-scale global phylogeny of this family, and hopefully that'll help us
Awesome.
sort some of their relationships out because a lot of them look really similar to each other. They're small and black, but they have really interesting um, biologies, right? So some of them are plant feeding, some of them are insect feeding, some of them are in between. So they will feed on the insect first, and then they will start eating the plant tissue afterwards. And there are some pest species, like some of them attack almond in like Europe. They attack citrus in Australia. So there, and then while other ones are used as biocontrol agents, they're like controlling like weed and other insects or other insects because they feed on both plant tissue and animal tissue. So it'll be really nice that we know what we're doing, right? Like even looking at them superficially, like a lot of them look alike, and there aren't that many people in the world that work on this group. So
Mhm.
myself and my advisor Mike Gates at USDA Entomology, and that's pretty much it for North America, really. So we're
Mhm.
really excited to have this big phylogeny to finally figure out, how these things are related to each other.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like a big puzzle, and you're taking a close look to see how all the edges work together so you can,
Yeah.
yeah, make that, figure out the tree of life. So we have some questions coming in here. JJ Walsh says, is there anything gardeners like me can do to support the good work of
Hmm.
wasps for biodiversity and ecological health? I love that question.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. That is a great question. So one of my former lab mates, she's actually was looking into something like this, right? So how to promote like parasitoid in that like natural habitats, and definitely growing like native plants really helps, right? Because even though um, they lay their eggs into other insects, so their larva feeds on insects, the adults either they don't feed or they will feed on nectar, right? So just like other pollinators. So if you plant a lot of native flowers and other plants that's supposed to be around the area instead of things that we've introduced, the ornamental plants, even though they're pretty, they might not be as good at like for the insects in our area. Right, so this not only helps parasitic wasps to get that extra boost of energy so they can keep go laying eggs. It also helps other pollinators. So I think, yeah. So I think that's a great way, and of course, conserving habitats, right? So we don't know much about a lot of these insects. So sometimes they live in like leaf litters um, to overwinter. So if you rake the leaves, you get rid of them too early. That's like a good habitat, and then they will have nowhere to go. Right, as soon as it gets cold, they all just like sort of land in there and like hunker down for the winter. Um, so I think that's also another thing. So basically, just like I feel like most gardeners are already passionate about this, is already doing a great job. So I think that'll also work for parasitoid wasps. Oh, are you there, Isa? Maybe we lost Isa for a
I'm
little bit.
muted. I was
Oh,
muted.
okay.
Sorry. My question was, I have a question to ask you. Um, how do you collect your study specimens?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'll bring
So
up this picture of you with the net. But
yeah. So like, of course, the net that we do a lot is called sweeping, right? So you go through the vegetation because you can't find them outside often, like with your naked eye. So you just take the net, you brush it against whatever's growing around there, and you'll collect a lot of them. And often we ended up putting our head through the net. So and then we use a little like a pooter, like aspirator, right? So like a little suction um, tube that sucks them all into a little vial, and that's how we collect them when we're out in the field. But often it's much easier to just set up one of these malaise traps, which basically is like one of these tents that have an alcohol bottle at the end, and the insects will fly in, and then they will get trapped in there. Of course, this captures all kinds of flying insects, but parasitic wasps um, seems to be collected a lot in here, right? So once you actually look at the collected specimen, you'll have all these tiny little things, are all the little wasps, little flies that you didn't realize that were there. Other ways of collecting, often we use these little bowls, like bee bowls, right? Like yellow bowls, blue bowls. You put a little bit of water or soapy water, you put them next to whatever habitat, and insects get drawn in there. So that's another way to collect wasps. But for me, gall wasps often, and the parasitoids of the gall wasp, you have to go find the galls yourself. So that's more like going from tree to tree, to look for these galls, right? You scan the vegetation, like they could be growing on leaves, stems, even sometimes in the roots. So you really have to look carefully on these plants and then collect these galls, and then you bring them home, and then you try to rear them out. So I've
Yeah,
tried some of everything depending on my organism, but for gall wasps, definitely just collect them and then rear them out. It's also kind of fun. You don't know what's going to come out of these things, right? So it's like little secret packets of presents, but like full of surprises.
totally. And for those who were with us on the bug scope, or with me on the bug scope last Thursday, I brought on some goldenrod galls, and we dissected two of them, but then the other three I'm keep holding on to rear out, and we'll see what comes out. It is very exciting, like a little present from nature in a way.
Yeah, I
um,
hope you get one of the parasitoids. So that's one of the Eurytoma parasitoids. It's also like attacking that gall.
cool. And you mentioned earlier that some of the parasitoids will attack like when the gall is smaller
Hmm.
versus larger because they have better access to get to the center, to get to the developing larva in the center. Is that the case with these ones too?
Yeah, yeah. So because the gall inducers themselves, right? The insects that make the galls, they have to attack the plant at a specific time for the leaf, right? Like the new tissue to be growing, right? Like often in the spring. So when they're doing this, the galls are relatively small, and then all the parasitoids, like their life cycles, all honed in on, the plant, right? So they know when the plants are going to flower or when leaves are going to grow.
Mm,
So they all come out right around that time from overwintering, and then they will all attack this resource around that time. So that's why climate change is a big problem. If this, the timing gets shifted, or it gets hotter earlier or colder earlier, the plant's going to shift obviously, and that kind of throws off the insects. But we don't really know what's going to happen. Some might adapt, right? So and start attacking earlier or later, but some might just die off because they come out too late, and then there's no suitable places for them to lay eggs anymore.
yeah. So yeah, their lives are very like um, like really rely on the accuracy of the timing.
Yeah.
And I noticed from the parasitoids that came out from the saddleback caterpillar that they did not live for very long after they came out. Like
Hmm.
I nearly like missed them because I had it all like in a container because I wasn't sure when they'd emerge. And is that because they were contained, or would they have lived longer
Yeah,
if
like
they
right.
were
That
flying
this is
outside?
when the food source comes in, right? So if you provided them with maybe a little bit of honey, like sugar water or something, they might live a little longer.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, like otherwise, their mission is to come out and then lay eggs and die. I think most parasitoid wasps don't live very long as adults. They're probably just like a week or two, if that. Right, because their mission is like near the end. They mate, or sometimes they don't even need to mate. They just lay eggs, and then they just reproduce. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I guess we didn't talk about this because they many Hymenoptera have the ability to control whether they lay females or male offsprings, and they control this through the eggs, because the males are haploid, right? So us humans, we're diploid. We have the X and Y, or X and Y if you're born male, or yeah, or X if you're female. But then for wasps, the males are haploid, so they only have one copy of the genes, and then the females have two copies. So the mother can often control this. So if there's not a lot of food, or resources are scarce, she would just like not lay any male offsprings, and then just have females, so they can switch, often control, or even completely go parthenogenic, right? Which means that asexual reproduction. They don't need to mate in order to make offsprings.
That's so wild to have that sort of control. Fascinating.
Yeah, so the gall
Hello.
wasps are on oaks actually have the thing where they switch from asexual in the spring to sexual. Oh, sorry, sexual in the spring to asexual in the fall. So they actually go through this weird cycle twice a year. It's really neat.
Interesting. So David Howden's asking, some gall wasps reproduce with different generations, often one asexual, on different stages. Do any of the parasites have a similar pattern of different generations on different hosts?
Yeah, so that's the part we don't know. A lot of these parasitoid wasps, at least from what we know so far, seems to be more opportunistic. Not too many generalists. So they will just come out. They'll probably attack whatever's on like red oak or even just like whatever comes out in the spring, right? And then they will have another generation probably in the fall, and then they will attack whatever's around in the fall. But really we don't know much. That's one of the reasons why we're studying this, because I'm trying to figure out like who's attacking who, and then are they specialists, are they generalists? But right now it's like we always thought most of them are specialists, but actually at least within galls, many of them might be more leaning towards generalists, meaning attacking a variety of hosts.
So we're at an hour now, and we even started a little late, I know, too. And you're still at the museum, Miles.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You might have to get home soon, so we can wrap it up now. I do have a question. Any last questions? Put them in the chat now. Otherwise, you can find Miles on Twitter, and I'll drop his handle here in the chat on Haps. And I do have a question. I have one last question for you from myself, and we'll see if other people have questions too. But it's kind of a silly question. Are figs your favorite fruit because there are wasps in them?
I do like figs, especially the ones they have at like Trader Joe's. I don't think we had them in Florida. Now that I moved to Virginia, I was like, wow, you guys have all kinds of figs. So yes, figs, I love them. Not sure
Cool.
if it's my favorite, but it's definitely up there.
You have a little extra appreciation for them because of the
Yes.
wasps. Cool. Are there other fruit that are like that?
That's made like pollinated in that way? Not really. I mean,
Yeah, like has
yeah, it's a
that.
very specialized system.
Cool. Cool. All right. Blinky Bill says, thanks, very interesting topic. David Howden says, it's midnight here, but I'd stay up all night for this stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I'm happy to have a chance to chat and answer some questions.
yeah, thanks so much for joining us. If you're available at some point in the future, we'd love to have a tour of the lab at the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
With, yeah, which that would be really fun. So I'll be in touch with you about that. But yeah, thanks so much, Miles, for coming on the Bug Scope.
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to chat with you, Yisa.
Yeah, cheers, and see you around. Yeah, bye everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Find Miles on Twitter. Say hello to him. Also, find his awesome page that he founded, Entomology Memes, as well. So, all right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.